really means to guarantee energy security, and this really sends wrong signals to the countries like of Middle East, like Iran, Iraq, and they feel more threat, and that's why then they have more will to create like alliances among each other against these Western countries, and even create more threats. Like as we have as an example, the alliance between Iran and Venezuela, and also this really does not appear to be successful. Another thing is that NATO should not and it cannot play a major role, because it's really almost impossible to have a consensus like among the NATO members on this issue, because the different members of NATO are dependent on other, like for example on Russian gas in different proportions. Like Germany is really highly dependent on Russia, so it will be really hard for NATO, and as Germany is one of the fundamental members, to get yes on NATO some of plans against these countries and suppliers of natural resources. And also, I think that I would underline on the word major. I think that NATO should play a role, but not a major role, because there are more other tasks like terrorism and peace and political stability that be more like highlighted and more be like accented by NATO. And if we have these problems solved like terrorism and political stability and peace, energy security problem will also be solved. So this is all, and thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer.
Thank you. There's no time for the questions, so please.
Well, you have mentioned that the case of energy is not related to NATO, since it's a military organization. And what do you think about the terrorist threats to the pipelines, etc.? Which organization should deal with terrorist threats, if not military?
Okay, thank you for the question. I did not say that energy security does not concern to NATO. I was just highlighting the point that NATO should not play a major role. It should play a role, but if NATO's role is really major and effective in terms of fighting against terrorists, then we won't have any terrorist threats coming on energy security issues as well.
Next question, please.
Tamar Babaladze, I have such a question. Do you think that today, in the 21st century, energy security is the main problem of international security agenda today?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's one of the most important problems, but I do not consider it to be like the most important problems. That's why I was talking about, because like terrorism, I think most of you would agree, is even more important than energy security issues. So it's really important, but not the most important nowadays.
Last question, please.
You mentioned that NATO should play some kind of role, but not major role, and it should really participate in military actions and prevent terrorism. Well, what do you actually mean by little role but not major role? And how do you think, is it really possible to prevent energy, prevent...
Round up, please.
Well, okay.
I will round up. So, it is really difficult to determine in the warehouse...
Sorry, time is up. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to answer as much as I understood the question. Okay, as I mentioned that NATO should play a role, and even nowadays I think that NATO is not playing that much important role in terms of energy security as the European Union does. So maybe this also might be like one of the examples. It's true that NATO talks about the importance of this issue, but obviously in realizing we don't see that much more attention is going to Afghanistan and terrorism, and so that's like playing a role but not a major one. So that can be can give you an understanding of what I'm trying to prove.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Just one very quick question.
Yes.
How would you describe NATO? Is it military? And you mentioned that it's a military organization, or you would give a broader definition?
Well, firstly, NATO is a military organization, but in my opinion, that does not mean that NATO should be concentrated only just on military issues.
Okay, is it a security organization or it's military?
military organization which tries to guarantee security. Thank you.
Well, once again, I will try to sum up my opponent's case. My opponent posed three major points. The first was that because NATO uses military means, energy security is not a question, and it can send wrong signals to Middle East. Well, I think that NATO is the one which is most capable in providing the energy security. We have seen that allies are forming in Middle East, but also by the fact of 2004 Istanbul Initiative, in which different countries involving Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar are also allied with NATO on this topic, is really important because it can really provide energy security. And Middle East countries are the ones who are one of the major providers of energy, and especially oil. And I think that NATO should continue its military mission, but if it can cure the reason, which is actually the energy resources, it can be solved more easily. The second point, that it is impossible to reach consensus. That is not right. EU and NATO has common members, and their cooperation is very important for achieving common goals. And Istanbul Initiative is one of the facts that confirm it. And the third objective was it should play a role, but not a major role, which wasn't really definitive, and I don't understand it. If it has to play a role, it means it has to reach objectives. So it
Now
can be by the energies.
Ms. Eradze.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the defender was talking about in her defense speech about like Iran and Iraq war, and when asked her question, she said it really turned out to be successful. And I would like to argue against that point because I think when NATO tried to use like military means to really solve this problem in the Gulf War, I don't think that it really helped in any terms because the reality is that we are still facing these problems. And when she was talking about that reaching consensus is not that much a problem among NATO members, I don't think that's right because, as I mentioned, like for just one example, for Germany, as it's so highly dependent on Russia, I don't think that Germany would agree on any like controversial measures aimed towards against Russia. So I think that, and I would again prove the point that NATO should not play a major role. And of course, like if you also consider that, like on 2006 Riga summit, Senator Lugar was talking about invoking Article 5, like in terms of energy security. By using military means, NATO would not be able to solve the energy security issues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. It is now time for our last topic, which is, should Georgia become one of the major energy transit routes for NATO member European countries? Our defender is Ms. Katerina Nowadashvili.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about I'm talking on behalf of my country, Georgia. We want to have good relation with NATO. We are potential members of this organization. So we must help Europe if we want them to help us in the future times. So I think that we should think as citizens of 21st century's world. So nowadays, if we see the past, there are almost 2 years after Georgia-Russia war, and when it was the most important time to make Europe the most important decision and stand on behalf of us, there was one big, there Russia switched off the gas, and Germany was nearly frozen. So that means that Russia took under control his situation. So nowadays Europe realized that he needs another way of this